Our next guest has been acting for over 50 years. She came to prominence as Violet Rutherford, the girl to give the beaver his first kiss on Leave It to Beaver. In the 1960s, she appeared in such memorable movies as The Children's Hour and The Birds, while also appearing on the TV shows Daniel Boone and The Twilight Zone. In the late 70s, she became a scream queen of sci-fi and horror fare, giving memorable performances as the hysterical Lambert in Ridley Scott's shocker Alien, and as the frightened Nancy in Philip Kaufman's post-counterculture update of Invasion of the Body Snatchers. She's made it a point to associate herself with offbeat yet quality work, from movies like Inserts, Going South, and The Witches of Eastwick, to TV shows like L.A. Law, The X-Files, and 6 Feet Under. Veronica Cartwright has been a welcome presence in almost anything she's appeared in. In The Right Stuff, as Betty Grissom, wife of Fred Ward's Gus Grissom, Cartwright locates the pride and disappointment that comes with being the wife of an astronaut. She's the opposite of Mary Jo Deschanel's extremely shy Annie Grissom. Cartwright's supporting performance is exactly the kind of extra layer of emotion that marks The Right Stuff as more than just a chronicle of the early days of the space race. It is my pleasure to welcome veteran actress Veronica Cartwright.
Hi.
How are you doing?
I'm good.
It's great to talk to you.
I didn't realize when I called in, I was able to hear Tom there.
Yes, Tom, and also the first guest of the evening was Donald Moffat, and he.
I didn't know that. Yes, I saw that it said Donald on the list, but.
Yes, and he wanted me to pass along his hello and say hi and pass along his love to Veronica Cartwright.
Oh, great. And I'd love to get Tom's email. Apparently, he said to pass that on too.
I will most certainly do that.
Great.
Well, to start with, your sister is an actress, and so
right.
I'm wondering, was that the impetus for you to become an actress, or was it independent of that?
Oh, no, that was totally, what happened was we were born in England,
right.
And so we're British.
Like Donald Moffat.
Yeah, like Donald. And then we emigrated to Canada, and then my dad always wanted to come to America, and in those days you needed to get a sponsor. So the sponsor sponsored us into Canada, and then we drove down. And I was like 6.5. My sister was 3.5. And we moved to El Segundo into an apartment. We didn't have a telephone. My mother didn't know anybody. And so she started asking around, how do you meet people? And so the landlady actually suggested that our kid, she said, your kids are cute. You should put them into this modeling, and introduced us, or my mom, to this woman, Ruthie Robinson's mother, Mrs. Robinson. And she told us about an agent who was Lola Moore, who was, like every kid's agent, and you'd go on these interviews, which were like cattle calls. And Angela went on her first interview at 3.5, and she had to say Mary had a little lamb. And she got the part as Pierre Angeli and Paul Newman's daughter in Somebody Up There Likes Me.
Wow.
And then I had thousands of freckles and long braids, and so I looked totally all-American, even though I wasn't. So I did lots of sort of print ads and peanut butter ads and things like that. And I ended up being the Kellogg's girl. I did Sugar Smacks and Rice Krispies and Corn Flakes and all of those before I did the Beaver. But no, it just sort of, Angela then at 4.5 got Danny Thomas Show, Make Room for Daddy. Mm-hmm. And then she was on that for 7 years. So the whole thing was totally accidental. Either one of us were in it.
But did you, I'm assuming you both took to it early and you just thought it was a lot of fun? Or?
Oh, yeah, I loved it. I mean, we had gone to we took little dancing classes and we put on little plays, like all the kids do in schools and stuff like that. And I was, I think, really lucky in the fact that I got different roles. Angela, she was on the series for 7 years, and then she was on Lost in Space, and then on another series after that, Make Room for Granddaddy. And I got to do movies and things like that. And I just, after doing the Children's Hour was when I decided that's exactly what I wanted to do. And I wanted to be like Shirley MacLaine.
Right.
So
well, I got to ask, and I'm sure you've been asked this a million times, but I'll ask it for my own edification. You're in the Burbs, and so I got to ask your Alfred Hitchcock anecdote, because we always hear these stories about Hitchcock, thinking actors are cattle or so forth. But I was wondering if his temperament was different with children, or
I got along great with him. I had done the Children's Hour, which apparently Mr. Hitchcock had seen.
Right.
And he requested meeting me for the part of Kathy. I went, and then, of course, he discovered that I was born in Bristol, and that happened to be where his favorite warehouse was for wine. So he proceeded to tell me the best bottles of wine. Of course, I was 12, so I wasn't quite on the ball. I wish I'd have known it now,
Right.
He told me how to cook a steak, because sometime I would need to, when I get married, I would need to know how to do that. All this bizarre stuff. He would tell, when we were on the set, he'd tell dirty jokes. Of course, I didn't have a clue, but everybody else was laughing, so I figured, well, I guess I laughed too. He was very generous. There would be things like the end of the movie, when you go where there's like that stack shot, and you see Rod Taylor, and then it zooms to Jesse, and then it zooms to me, and then Tippy. And there's where he goes to open the door, and he moves his hand, and he opens the door. And I said to Hitch, well, won't people know that there's no door? And he says, well, if I have a door, I'd never be able to see you. And he goes, show him how it's done. So Rod leans forward, and he totally mimes the whole thing, and the whole thing is done with light. And he goes, now that is the magic of movies.
Wow.
I mean, it was like the classic thing. And it was like so fabulous. And every time you watch it, you don't even think about it. You just believe there's a door there.
Right.
It was great. He was really nice to me. And I had my 13th birthday while I was on the set, and they threw me a big surprise birthday party. And he did an image of himself on a piece of cardboard, and he did his image, and he wrote, to the woman I love, Veronica, and then signed it Alfred Hitchcock. So I still have that.
That's great. If you're just joining us, we're talking to Veronica Cartwright about many things, but also on the occasion, we're looking back at Philip Kaufman's The Right Stuff, 25 years ago, nominated for Best Picture. Well, I got to ask, because before we get to The Right Stuff, and this sort of leads into it, because you, in the late 70s, as you said, you were lucky enough to get a lot of variety of roles, but there was a brief moment there where I guess you could have been labeled a scream queen, with Body Snatchers and Alien, kind of back to back.
Right.
And, so I gotta ask about. Obviously, Body Snatchers probably, I'm assuming, led to you into The Right Stuff. So how did you get Body Snatchers, and what was that like to
well, actually, I had just done a movie, Going South, and I had just come back from Mexico, because we shot it down in Durango, Mexico.
Mm-hmm.
And I got this request to go in and meet Phil Kaufman and Bob Solo, who was the producer. So I went in and I talked to them. And I guess, I don't know, I was slightly sunburned, and my hair was sort of wild, and I had like an antique shirt on. I mean, I guess I just sort of looked like the hippie girl that she was supposed to be.
Mm-hmm.
And so I ended up getting that part. And the whole ending of that movie, where I'm screaming and everything, I was told one thing, and Donald was told another, and we didn't know how it was going to end, and we just simply reacted off of what the other person did.
Wow. What were you told? I gotta ask. Can you tell?
Well, I think I can't totally remember, but I believe it was I was supposed to keep myself totally under control because I was possibly a pod.
Right.
And but then when Donald saw me, and then I talked to him, but I'm staying very focused and not trying to show any emotion, because if you showed any emotion, then that meant that you were, off,
right.
That you were bad. So I can't remember exactly how Phil worded it, but I thought I thought that everything was going to be okay. Mm-hmm. And then all of a sudden he turned around and did that scream, and I just flipped out. I mean, that was like totally spontaneous, because I really thought that we were like going off at the end of the movie, Mm-hmm. And it didn't work out that way. But then I just did that invasion, the invasion with Nicole Kidman,
right.
And that was as a result of doing Invasion of the Body Snatchers. Cause
well, it is one of the great endings in horror film history, Invasion of the Body Snatchers. It really is something, a real shocker at the time. And so then, before we get back to Phil Kaufman, I got to ask, was it because of that I guess Ridley Scott saw that? And
no, I don't know whether he ever saw that or not. When I went on the interview for Alien,
right.
I went and saw them at 20th Century Fox in California, mm-hmm. and I read for the part of Ripley. And I happened to be going to London mm-hmm. To visit. And I thought, well, while I'm over there, I might as well go see them. So I called my agent and I said, well, look, I'm here. Maybe they would like to see me again. Because I am British, and I didn't know whether there was a quota system. A lot of times these movies have quota systems.
Right.
Where they can only bring over so many Americans. Because mm-hmm. I had done the movie Inserts there, and that had been one of the things, and I happened to have an American accent, but I was also British, mm-hmm. as was Stephen Davies. So it helped to bring over, the other two actors, Richard Dreyfuss and Jessica.
Right.
So I thought, well, might as well take the chance. And so I went and read for them again when I was in England, and then I ended up getting it. But I thought I had the part of Ripley. When I went back over there and they sent me back over and they called and they said I was to come in to do wardrobe for Lambert, I said, oh, no, I'm playing Ripley. And they said, no. That was the only part I'd ever read for. I read 3 times for it. And it was always Ripley. I'd never even looked at the script from Lambert's point of view.
Right.
So anyway, that's how that came about. But originally it started out as just like a B movie,
right.
and just sort of took off.
Well, I got to ask about, for my money, the great moment in Alien, and that's actually the slap, if you will, to Sigourney Weaver.
Yeah, and that was cut.
That was cut, but now now it's back in the director's cut. And I must admit, when I saw that when it was re-released, I guess 5-6 years ago, I found that quite startling. But also, when I saw it, it was actually kind of a crowd-pleasing moment. I remember in the theater I saw it, they actually cheered. At that time, they were just as angry, I guess, as Lambert was. And it's a very good slap. So I was wondering, how much did you hold back and how much did you not? On
well, see, what happened was every time I went to hit her, mm-hmm. Sigourney was ducking. So then Ridley, I mean, we did it, I guess, about 3 or 4 times. I'd come in and I go, and she would move her head. So Ridley just came up to me and said, I want you to get her this time. So I said, okay. so I came in and I went one way and then I backhanded her. And she went right into it. She was not happy. I mean, I really hit her hard. But it was, what was called for in the scene.
It's a great moment. Like I said, it was one of the few additions to the director's cut I really did like. I thought it was pretty...
Well, it's interesting in the outtakes. I'm like in 9 of the 12 takes,
right.
Outtakes. I mean, I didn't realize it was in it that much.
If you just joined us, we're talking to actress Veronica Cartwright about a lot of things, but on the occasion of this looking back at The Right Stuff, which was nominated for Best Picture 25 years ago. So you did Body Snatchers, and then a few years later, Philip Kaufman is doing The Right Stuff. I'm guessing, was it a case of he remembered you from Body Snatchers and had a role for you?
Yes, as a matter of fact, he said that he wrote it with me in mind, but that didn't stop the fact that I had to go in and, read for it and stuff, because other people needed to be convinced. Mm-hmm. But Phil told me that he wrote it for me. So, which was really great. And I had been in a really bad car accident, and I had just gotten my cast off my leg. Mm-hmm. And when I knew I had this interview, I thought, oh, my gosh. So I was walking up and down stairs so I wouldn't limp. My mother even had to drive me to the interview because I wasn't allowed to drive. Mm. And when I saw Phil, he came out, I went, oh, my. So I danced like, hey, what's happening? I sort of did a jig down the hall so he wouldn't know that I was limping. Oh, my gosh, and just prayed that they didn't watch me leave. No, I went in looking totally patriotic in red, white, and blue. I thought, oh, my God, she was such a wonderful character.
Well,
and,
I'm curious.
It was so sad, she's so real. And I just thought that actually Phil did a brilliant job of adapting Tom Wolfe's book.
Right.
Because so many times the adaptations have nothing to do with what the book is.
Right.
And I think he totally caught the essence and the flavor, and it was literally like he put action to stream of consciousness. Mm-hmm. And I just thought it was a brilliant screenplay.
Well, I gotta ask what research you did. Were you able to meet Betty Grissom? Or
no, because Betty was still in lawsuits all these years later because he did not blow the hatch.
Right.
And, of course, there was a big controversy whether he did or he didn't, and NASA was so let down, and Look magazine and all these things, right. That they made, pushed it into the background. That's why it was just a ceremony on an airstrip, and why right. She never got to meet Jackie. And, of course, it was discovered later that it was pressure. When it hit the water, they'd never had anything go that far out and come back down,
Right.
So then they decided that they would remove any kind of explosive hatch. And unfortunately, when there was the big electrical fire where he perished, mm-hmm. You see him trying to unscrew the hatch mm-hmm. to get them out. Right. It was just horrible. So Betty, rightfully so, was incredibly bitter, and there were still suits going on. They showed me footage. The research department gave everybody on the movie a package of what their story was, mm-hmm. with as much information as you could possibly imagine. And I saw footage. It was like I saw that purse that she comes to the airport in when they drop her off in the helicopter.
Right.
And it was a straw purse with these flowers on it, and it was just like such an essence of what Betty was, Mm-hmm. So we tried to duplicate that and tried to duplicate as much of her clothing as we possibly could to get, how she felt. You know, she so wanted to be something more than she was.
Right.
And
well, and I said at the beginning, it is one of those, that character is one of those extra layers that Kaufman decided to put in the film, that you can imagine a studio executive saying, you know, we could lose 10 minutes if you cut this part out, because it's not totally tangent to the main thrust of your story, but it is one of those extra layers that makes The Right Stuff what it is.
Mm-hmm. Well, also it justifies what Fred's character and why he responds, you know,
mm-hmm.
why he responded the way he did. Gus, you know.
Right. Well, I want to ask about that first, Fred Ward, but first I want to ask about, because there is these two groups that we are seeing in the film, the astronauts, and we see them together, and then there's the group of the astronauts' wives and
mm-hmm.
girlfriends, and we see them together. So I'm curious about some of those scenes, and was there any of that, you know, off camera trying to kind of, you know, create some kind of facsimile of that kind of group of...
Oh, absolutely. I mean, we would be put into groups. The guys would be put into groups, and then the women would be put into groups. We all became, like, really good. First, we used to hang out, you know, all the time. And there was this place called Tosca's, I believe it's still there, where they play opera. And Sam Shepard actually used to go play pool in the back all the time. Mm-hmm. And the lady who runs it was a very, very good friend of Phil's and his lovely wife, Rosemary. And so it sort of became like the hangout. But when we would go, the guys would sort of drift off, and they'd go and all play pool, you know, and we'd all sit around, and we'd be talking and everything. And then the guys would come out. I mean, it was just fascinating. It was like, you know, it was like we were doing what was in the film. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if it was a conscious thing or an unconscious thing. It was fascinating. Right. You know, we'd like hang out for a while, and then they'd drift off and go do their thing, and we'd drift off and go and do ours. And but it was a great movie for comradeship. Everybody was terrific on it, and because there were so many of us, we were in the honey wagons, and I remember I was in the honey wagon with Pamela Reed. We shared, but of course we had underslips that were so big, one would have to go and stand on the toilet in order to be able to get their dress on, so that because we couldn't move. It was ridiculous. We used to sit like two soldiers sitting next to each other knitting. I mean, it was hysterical. And so you formed all sorts of bonds. It was very cool. And they've had a couple of revivals of it, and I've run into Mary Jo, and you know, I don't know, it was a great comradeship that sort of picked up. Even if you don't see people for a long period of time, it's great to see them because there was a true bond. Well,
and along with this pairing off, this siphoning off of these groups, I'm guessing as far as the guys' side, I mean, so you're kind of teamed up with Fred Ward, and so I was wondering what that was like, because up to that point, you know, Fred had been seen in some things, but he was still, it wasn't post-Right Stuff where everyone, you know, became aware of Fred Ward. So I was wondering.
Well, nobody knew Ed Harris either.
Right, Ed Harris and some.
I mean, and Dennis had just started sort of. You know, I guess he's done more work than anybody. Right. Sam was totally known as a playwright. Mm-hmm. Nobody was really known. I mean, it was easy for everybody, I mean, I think as an audience, right, to get lost in their characters because they all weren't movie stars. Right. As a result of that, I mean, Lance Hendrickson works all the time, and of course Dennis, and Sam has gone on to do some wonderful stuff since, and
well, Jeff Goldblum.
Jeff Goldblum. Well, I had been in Invasion of the Body Snatchers with Jeff.
Right.
I mean, he was my husband in that.
It's kind of one of those things where, seen today, The Right Stuff is an all-star cast. Where seen in 1983 is kind of a cast of unknowns or relative unknowns.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the huge thing that went on when with Ed Harris, and him on the cover of Newsweek, and it was the whole time that John Glenn was actually running for office. Well, it was pretty intense.
Yeah. Well, so you do the film, and so you finally get to see it. And what did you think? And what did you think of it? Obviously, then the immediate reaction, and how do you feel about the film? I guess as we talking 25 years later.
Well, hello.
Hello, I'm here.
Oh, hi. Somebody just came on and told me I was in the host queue.
I'm sorry. I don't know what that is. No, it's not me.
Well, they did the most incredible premiere I have ever in my life experienced. It was just fantastic. They did it at the Kennedy Center in Washington, D.C., and they took over an old airport. There was a section, I guess, of the airport where they had old planes, old, sauce with camels and all sorts of things. And then, the right stuff. What's his name? Chuck Yeager. Chuck Yeager actually flew down the Potomac and led a flight, and they just skimmed right along the Potomac. I tell you, it was the most spectacular thing. And then we all went to this party, and they had like a Glenn Miller band, and people would be dancing out by these old planes, and everybody was there. It was fantastic. And then I guess about 6 years ago, they did a showing at the Egyptian Theater with a brand new print and everything.
Right.
And it was really fabulous. Well, but I had also done that thing with Roger Ebert, and they showed it at Champaign, Illinois, at his festival that he does.
And it's interesting to note that I'm sure at the time, as I've done research, it got unanimous praise, but it was also, there were some people who were a little concerned about its tonal shifts, because it's satire, then it's docudrama, then it's...
but it was the book. That's what the book was.
There's journalism, but now it seems, I guess you could say time has caught up with it, where the shifts in tones don't seem to be as, they're not as alien as to audiences as they might have been back then.
Right. Well, also, movies now, that was a 3-hour movie with an intermission.
Right.
And, that was like, oh, my gosh, 3 hours? Well, look how many movies come out now that are 3 hours. And we don't even get an intermission.